Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Lewis Vaughan-Jones. The United States and the UK are to announce a deal to reduce tariffs later. Neither country has officially confirmed the details, but President Trump says it'll be a, quote, major trade deal with a big and highly respected country. And in the last hour, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has teased the announcement. Have a listen to what he said during a statement on defence.
And we must use this moment to do the same, deepening our partnerships with allies, old and new, from across Europe to meet the defence challenges of our age, to the United States, an indispensable ally for our economic and national security. As you know, talks with the US have been ongoing, and you'll hear more from me about that later today.
Right, let's try and work out what's happening here. Joining me is our chief political correspondent, Henry Zeffman at Westminster, and our deputy economics editor, Darshini David. Right, let's start in Westminster. Henry, what do we know and not know about what's about to happen?
Well, what we know is that a deal is going to be announced by the US and the UK later today. What we don't know is basically everything else. I mean, we have a sense that this is going to be a deal which is not, by the way, a full comprehensive free trade deal, but does specifically reduce some of the tariffs that have been imposed by Donald Trump, perhaps mitigate their impact. And of course, also the UK will have offered the US things in return. That's all going to be very interesting. But diplomatically, politically, I think this is a big win for Sir Keir Starmer because lots of countries have wanted a deal like this. The UK appears to have got there first. And this morning, we asked John Healey, the Defence Secretary, about what's in the offing.
The US is an indispensable ally to the UK on our economic security and on our national security. And there's been really hard negotiations with the US over securing an economic deal for Britain since Keir Starmer went to the White House in February. Now, in that period, ministers like me have stepped back from offering a running commentary on those discussions or any timelines, and we've done that to give our negotiators the space to strike the deal that Britain needs. And so it's not for me to comment on that, I think, today, but it's for us to remind ourselves that the US is that indispensable ally for us on economic security and in the area that I lead on, of course, in defence.
Well, that was John Healey being pretty coy. Hard to think of a bigger political style contrast with Donald Trump, who's obviously been bombastic about this already. But what I think John Healey's comments reflected there when he was talking about Keir Starmer going over to the Oval Office is that Keir Starmer has forged a warmer relationship with Donald Trump than I think many people might have expected. But until now, it hasn't been clear what he's got out of that relationship. And I think you'll begin to hear the Prime Minister and others around him start to make their argument that this is what he's got out of that relationship.
Henry, thank you for that. Back with you in a moment. Darshini, let's come to you and look at the economics here. What are the kinds of things that could be in play here?
Well, we heard Henry there say this is not a full free trade agreement, and that is absolutely central to what we're talking about here. We're looking more at a kind of pact on tariffs that would potentially help our biggest class of goods exports to the US, cars, and perhaps try to avoid more penalties for our second biggest category, pharmaceuticals. However, that is still the minority of the goods that we sell to the US. That 10% baseline tariff that the president introduced on most goods sold into the US may be set to remain. And don't forget, the majority of what we sell from the UK to the US is services, and that's a growing share. So in economic terms, actually, this probably wouldn't move the dial very much. And there's all sorts of details to be hammered out, because what we understand we're likely to get is sort of a very broad framework here. But as Henry was saying here, that's, the symbolic importance of this is crucial, really, because we are first in line to any kind of deal, even though it's kind of a mini deal, what we're talking about here. And that, when you're talking about the future relationship and the most important trading relationship for the UK with any individual country, is absolutely front and centre.
Henry, any deal, even if it's this mini deal, as Darshini just said, will come with compromises almost by definition. What are some of the areas that are potentially fraught for the UK to compromise on?
Well, something that government ministers have very conspicuously not ruled out in discussions about this in public over the last few weeks is some kind of reduction in the digital services tax, which is a tax paid here in the UK by some of those massive US tech companies with operations here. If that is the case, and we don't know, but if that is the case, I think that will certainly be controversial politically here. So I think we'll have to see how the politics of all of this shakes out. But on the other hand, I think the political view in Downing Street and in large parts of the Labour Party will be that after a massively bruising set of local election results last week, things have gone pretty well for Keir Starmer. He signed a full, comprehensive, proper big free trade deal with India just a couple of days ago. There's now going to be this pact of whatever form it takes with the US. We're building up in 10 days' time to an agreement between the UK and the EU, which will make flesh the reset that Keir Starmer has been talking about since he came into office 10 months ago with the EU. So all pretty significant geopolitical strides being made by the Prime Minister. Of course, whether that actually changes British voters' minds about how his government is doing is a separate question.
OK, Henry, thank you for that. And thank you to Darshini too. Quick reminder, a live page is up and running with all the latest on what we know and at the moment what we don't know about the deal. But as we get those details through in the hours ahead, they will be there on the live page on the BBC News website and on the app.